So what we're going to start with is the blanket stitch, regular blanket stitch, which can look nice around the edges of the petals. So I've actually got Sashko thread here to just demonstrate with, but embroidery flush pearl cotton are great to use as well, or wools, that type of thing. And you can try it with 6 ends of embroidery floss, or 2 or 3 if you want to. So what we do is we start on the edge of the petal, and I'm just going to pull up from the back there. And now what I do is I come over a little bit to the right there, down and into the petal. So again, you can vary the length of these prongs if you want to, or keep them all the same. So I've moved a little bit to the right and then down, take the needle in, come back up to the edge of the petal, wrap the thread behind and pull through. And that's your first blanket stitch. I'll then rotate it slightly, move along to the right and down into the petal, and then come back up on the edge, catch it, and then wrap my thread behind, pull through, and then just keep going round like that. And what you can do is you could try longer prongs or shorter ones, depending on the pattern that you're going round. So it's along to the right and down into the fabric, back up to the edge and wrap the thread around. And just keep going like that, over, down, touch the fabric there. So it gives a nice edge to the petal whilst also doing the sort of straight line detail as well. Again, what you can try is doing them really close together as well. So rather than going too far over to the right and down, you can just go a very small distance and then back down and up, so that your stitches are really close together. So it almost looks like a satin stitch, which we've done on the other weeks. This one can just be a tricky one to get started. So you'd start on the edge of your petal, come across into the fabric, back up to the edge, wrap the fabric, the thread behind, sorry, and pull through there. And that's your blanket stitch. So that was the normal blanket stitch. And like I said, if you do it close together, your buttonhole stitch, what we'll have a go at doing is the blanket stitch in a wheel now, which could suit the flowers here on July, or you might just want to do a sampler. So the way I find this easiest to mark out, unless you have drawn the actual lines on, like on this July template here, is I'll draw a circle with a dot in the middle, and I'm going to work around that dot. You can do it, as you can see here, where this might have a French knot in the middle, and in which case you'd have a little bit of a space between the center. So rather than going right into the center like I have on this one, you'd do a slight gap in the middle like this one here, so you could pop a French knot in if you wanted to. So again, we start on the outside edge for our blanket stitch wheel and do the same again. I come over to the right, into the center and back out to that outside edge and wrap the thread behind. And then I turn, and again over to the right, into the center and back out to the outside edge. So if you are okay with it being right into the middle, your blanket stitch wheel, just go back into that same hole again. And then just keep coming round back to the center there. This can look nice on little berries as well. So perhaps for the holly berries, you could do this blanket stitch wheel, and again, if you put it close together, it almost becomes like a satin stitch. Just carry on round. So over to the right, into the center, back to the outside edge, and wrap my thread behind. And then for my last one there, I'll come in the center. Well, I might just get one more on there. Just do that last one. So for my last one, I'm going to go into the center. I can come up into where I started, wrap the thread behind, and then just take my thread over that last stitch, close to it, and through to the back there to anchor it down. And that's your little blanket stitch wheel. On this one that's just in progress here, I did them as little berries on the end of this little vintage embroidery. And the other thing you can do, you can see just about there, it's a bit hard to see with the grey, but I did it right to the centre, or the wheel that you work round, you can always offset that the dot that you work around from. So if I was going to do it on a berry, rather than in the center, I might do my dot sort of off center so that it just gives a bit of dimension to the berry. You can see there I use that as my central point to go round there. The other way you can use the blanket stitch, as well as around the edge of your petals, or like I said, in this wheel pattern for berries or the center of flowers, is to go around the edges of leaves as well. So if you start at the edge, this will be a blanket stitch that gets longer and shorter. So if you draw a sort of leaf shape with a line down the middle, you're going to work round each edge and along to this central line there. So if I go into that central line and back up here to the edge and wrap the needle round and then along, and what I can do is just do one to the point of the leaf to give it that shape. And then I'll carry on down the other side. So what I've done there to get the point of the leaf was go back into that last prong, and then I'll go back into it again to start going down the other side. And I can go into the last stitch on the other side of the leaf as well. And then to get the point, like I said, go into that same point as the last two stitches and come out point of the leaf. And then just take the thread over. You can then just do, if you want to, a back stitch up the center of the leaf as well. I will just go over the double blanket stitch because this could always be a nice way to fill in a stem if you did it closer together. So I've drawn 2 parallel lines. I'm going to work along this one and then back the other way. So again, I'll come over to the right, down into my fabric, and then back up to the edge and wrapped my thread behind. Over, in, wrap the thread behind, over, down, thread behind. And then when I've finished, like I said, you just take that last stitch and anchor it down on the edge. And now I'm going to work back the other way. So if I'm going to slightly stagger it, I'll start a little bit over to the left here. I'll come across and I'm landing so that I come between these 2 stitches here, back up to the edge. Over. Again, finish there. So that's your double blanket stitch. I've just pinned on here a little patch of fabric in a sort of leaf shape, because we sort of started to discuss adding little bits of applique if you wanted to, applying another piece of fabric. So that could be also an option for some of your leaves or petals. And then you could always do a small little blanket stitch round the edge to hold it in place. And leave it with a raw edge, but the blanket stitch would sort of frame the edge of that fabric and stop it from fraying. That's another way you can use the blanket stitch there. So next we'll look at the closed buttonhole. So that's what I've got round the edge of this flower here. Little triangles there. It could suit something like the chrysanthemum edges for November, or just a stitch you want to have a go with. So for the blanket stitch, the closed blanket stitch, what we'll do is I end up almost working this way round rather than this way round for the blanket stitch, so that the edge that's going to be closed here will actually be this bottom line rather than the top. So I'll come up from the back and I keep my thread hanging down below, and I'll come over as we would do with a normal blanket stitch. We are just working upside down here, but rather than go down and in a straight line, we go over to this point and come out next to where we have just come up on that bottom line, wrap the thread under, pull that, and then we go back into that last hole and do diagonally again to create that triangular shape and wrap the thread under. So it actually takes 2 stitches almost to complete that closed buttonhole. So again, diagonally over, or as I've said when we've done the other blanket stitch, along and up into the fabric, back next to where I've just come up, take that thread under, give that a pull, and then we go back into that point, come along the line, wrap our thread under. So it could actually help if you wanted to sort of draw the points that you're going to create that triangle with. So over to here, back down next to where I've come, wrap underneath, back into that point, along the line and underneath, over, back to where I've come out, back in at that point, again along the line, and wrap my thread under. So lastly, we'll have a go with the crossed buttonhole. So this was the closed and this is going to be the crossed. So we come up at A, we're going to go diagonally over, and then just for this first one we do come out straight to the left here. So we'll go A, B, C, pull it up, and then we will go over to here. So starting again, come out on this bottom line, we go diagonally over like we did with the closed buttonhole, and then we're going to come back up on back down onto that bottom line and wrap the thread underneath. And now, rather than how we did with the closed buttonhole, we went into the same hole on the top, we're actually going to go back a stitch, sort of above that last stitch there, a little bit further in, and then back along on the bottom row and wrap our thread under so that we've done a cross. So then we repeat that again. So if we were just starting, we'd come up diagonally over and back in on the bottom line, and then back, so we cross over that last stitch and back out on that bottom line here. So we're creating this cross, then diagonally over, back to the bottom line, over here, and along to that bottom line. So you're crossing the stitch rather than going into the point of it. Just go over it one more time there. So I'm coming up on the bottom line, diagonally over, into that top line, back onto the bottom line, and wrap my thread under. And then rather than in here, back a little bit and cross it back over to that bottom line and wrap the thread under. Diagonally over, back into the bottom, and then cross over that last stitch, back to the bottom line, and wrap the thread under.